Hello, my name is Nathan Barnatt, former gravedigger from New England, and you're watching Grave Stories, a show that takes a look at some of the most intriguing, strange, dark, and mysterious real-life events to occur on our planet, and sometimes off our planet. Some of you may know of my Grave Stories podcast, where I read true ghost accounts. Well, I thought it was time to take the show to YouTube and add a little twist. On the podcast, I will continue to read true ghost accounts, but here, on YouTube, I'll take a look at all things strange and do my own research. Thanks to Tinfoil Tom, who helps me research and write these videos. I hope you all check out his channel. Now, before I begin this episode, I need to make sure to protect myself from those who may not appreciate my spilling of the top secret beans. Some of the things I'll talk about in this series may make certain organizations unhappy. Now, in order to protect myself, I'll hide my identity. So please, everyone, start watching the video
now. If you watched before this point, don't. Then you won't know who I am, and my life will be okay. Great. Thanks. Now let's begin. When you think of found footage, a few movies might come to mind. VHS, Paranormal Activity, Cloverfield, and what some consider to be the originator of the genre, the Blair Witch Project, or even the War of the Worlds, the 1938 radio broadcast from Orson Welles that fooled the world into thinking aliens were attacking and taking over the planet. I feel that broadcast introduced a new format of telling stories, maybe even inadvertently inspired people like Andy Kaufman and mockumentary filmmakers, or ARGs who dabble in mixing reality with fiction. But speaking specifically about found footage filmed storytelling, most of us think of the Paranormal Activity films and the Blair Witch Project, Blair Witch being the one that started it all. Well, there was actually one that came before the Blair Witch Project, a classic of the genre that came out a full decade before Blair Witch. A film that many considered so frighteningly realistic that it became the stuff of internet legend and urban lore, until it came back into the mainstream, thanks to things like DVD and Blu-ray. Tonight, we're discussing the cult classic found footage film, the McPherson Tape. The story of the McPherson Tape is a terrifyingly realistic portrayal of a family being forcibly abducted by a group of aliens invading Earth. Like I referenced earlier, I feel it's a mixture of the War of the Worlds and Blair Witch. Writer-director Dean Alioto even said his goal was to make War of the Worlds on videotape. To some, the McPherson Tape is considered one of the most important pieces of evidence ever captured about UFO-related activity. But many still consider this film to be the genuine article, a real UFO encounter now being covered up by forces outside the film. Here's the setup. It's October 1983, and the McPherson family has gathered in a semi-remote cabin in Connecticut to celebrate young Michelle's 5th birthday. Mikey is the wannabe filmmaker of the family, and he brought his VHS recorder to capture the event, and he rolls for the duration of the events in the film. Shortly after Michelle blows out the candles on her cake, the family realizes that the house has lost power, and they soon learn they may not be alone in the woods. As they investigate, all hell breaks loose, as the family is caught in a struggle for survival against a group of extraterrestrials. To the audience in the 1980s, these events were terrifying because no one even knew this was a movie. And for some time, folks in the UFO community thought this wasn't a horror movie, rather a documentary, even to this day. There are some interesting circumstances that led to this case of mistaken film identity. Dean Alioto knew he wanted to be a director, and fresh from dropping out of film school, Dean was hungry for a project. Dean had this to say to Slash Film about how funding for his first feature came to be. I met a producer who said he wanted to invest $6,500. I kind of laughed it off and said, the only thing I could do for that money is a home video. At the time, I'd been reading this memoir called Communion by Whitley Strieber, who described his own abduction by aliens. So I decided to take the abduction storyline and embed it into a home video. Dean didn't want to make his feature debut on VHS, but 16mm film was expensive, and he was on a deadline. So, with $6,500 in hand, Dean set course into the unknown found footage realm, the final frontier. Production went smoothly, and for a no-budget production, things looked great. Part of what sells the film so well is the dialogue. It's all improv.
We're pretty worried, being this close to Halloween, what she would look like when she came out.
Where is this man? Of course, he never paid anything.
But she's taking after mom, so that's okay.
Jason doesn't talk about it. Almost he got a reason. I know. I feel like he should. They didn't.
Alioto wrote a 10-page beat sheet, but everything else was done in camera, on the fly, in real time. The chemistry was fantastic between the cast members and lends to the authentic feel of the production. In a stroke of genius, Alioto himself, playing the family member, recording the events in question, could direct the other actors, with hand signals and shouts of terror. He said in the Slash film interview, "I thought I could just cue people by screaming, 'Oh my God, what is that?' and pan the camera over and everyone would know to go to the next scene." Once things wrapped, Alioto pitched his film to anyone who would listen, but no one was interested. Something that's important to remember is this was before the Blair Witch Project exploded in the 90s. No one had ever really seen anything like this before. He was truly ahead of his time. Eventually, Dean did find a distributor for the film to get it out to the home video market. He sent his masters, and artwork was created. The film wasn't going to get a major theatrical release, but at the very least, it was going to be seen in video stores across America. Or so he thought. That's when Dean got a tragic call.
It ended up getting distributed, and so kind of happy ending, except the distribution company burned to the ground, literally. And so
wait a minute.
It was
just before you move on. What type of process was it in at the time? I mean, when you say it burned to the ground, did it burn down with some original footage or something?
Flames and fire. That's what happened. It literally burned to the ground. I'm not saying that the guy who owned the distribution company set it on fire for insurance reasons. It wouldn't be the first time that happened, but anyway, that was it. So I lost my main master and all my artwork. And I thought, all right, well, that's it. Time to move on.
Dean thought all was lost with his film. His masters and his artwork were gone. Literally burned to the ground. But then he received a call that would change everything for the hungry young filmmaker.
So flash forward a few years later, and I get a call from this guy named Sean David Morton. And Sean is saying that he represents people who are interested in this film. He tells me, he says, "Do you know anything about this found footage?" Which is the first time I'd ever heard this. I think we're talking about maybe 91, 92, around there, maybe 93. He says that I guess a few screeners got out to some mom and pop video stores before the distribution company burned to the ground.
Apparently, some copies of the film had been sent to video stores, and someone within the UFO community had passed it around, with the end credits edited out to appear as a real-life UFO encounter. Not only that, but it had top UFO researchers and a former U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Donald Ware convinced that this was all true.
It did not have the appearance of being a scripted production.
Not only that, but someone in Hollywood was calling. Speaking with Slash Film, Dean said, "The guy that told me all this then said that there are some TV shows that want to do a story on the movie, including Unsolved Mysteries, Hard Copy, and a Fox show called Encounters. I told him the first one was out because this mystery was pretty much solved. But we went with Encounters, and they did this 7-minute segment on the world's greatest UFO hoax for their program in the early 90s. I went on national TV and debunked my own movie." Dean eventually did find some success in Hollywood. He did a bigger budget adaptation of the McPherson Tape for the UPN network in the late 90s under the proper name Alien Abduction Incident in Lake County, which on its own caused another stir, as folks including leading UFO researcher Stanton Friedman thought this production was true. Deja vu.
Then about 2 years later, I'm working on the Stephen J. Cannell crime series, and the head writer of the show, Paul Chitlick, says to me, "I heard about this video. I want to see it." He watches it and he says, "I dig it. I can get us a TV movie deal with this." And I flippantly said, "Okay, Paul, you can, write the script. I'll have a story by credit, and I'll direct it, and we'll produce it together."
Again, the way Alioto presented the film was without disclaimers that this was indeed a film. It also followed a real documentary called Real Vampires Exposed, doubly causing confusion. Was this a documentary or a movie? Again, this bigger budget remake of Alien Abduction, the original title of the McPherson Tape, still predated Blair Witch, so the style misled viewers into thinking this was indeed a real-life event. But by this point, AOL chat rooms and message boards had become commonplace, and while debate raged on for a while, it was at least made known it wasn't real and was in fact a studio production. The head of TV and movies at the network said, "This garbage will never air on my network again." Alioto had a 3-movie deal, but after that first airing, they fired him. Again, he was way ahead of his time. Just look how popular the found footage format has become now. I feel they work now because the audience is in on it. When they were being fooled, it was hard to be invested and follow people talking over each other and watch shaky camera work. The only people who enjoyed it were the UFO marks, the ones who believed in it and wanted it to be real. I'd definitely be one of them. But now that we're all in on it, we can enjoy the format and go along for the ride. And who knows, maybe it was real. And all of this is just what the government made Dean say to cover up the true story of that poor McPherson family. Dean later directed various TV shows for multiple different networks. He's even made a few more features, but nothing will ever quite dig up as many bones as his first feature, or even his second, The McPherson Tape, also known as Alien Encounter, which finally got the credit it deserves, with a proper release and a screening at Fantastic Fest in 2019 in front of a packed audience. And this time, nobody cut Dean's name out of the credits. Regardless, this is an important piece of horror film legend, and who knows, without the McPherson Tape, we may never have had the Blair Witch Project. One thing's for sure, if it wasn't for Dean's movie, we wouldn't have this video you're watching right now. So how about you drop a like on the video to show appreciation for Dean, aliens, VHS tapes, Dad, the server, and them. Thanks for watching, everyone. My name is Zamina, and you've been watching Grave Stories. Until next time, please check out my podcast under the same title, Grave Stories, where I read true ghost accounts. You can find it on all podcast applications and websites. Thanks for watching, everyone. Goodbye.